Hello, everybody. Let's talk about grappling in the real world in street fighting. Now, what is the real world? The real world is a whole bunch of places, right? A street fight that occurs at a club, inside a club with bouncers and a crowd, is a lot different than, I don't know, a street fight at the Jersey Shore on sand, right? I'll tell you one thing I know for sure. There's always, if there's nobody around, anything can happen in terms of the length of grappling, okay, or what could occur. Most fights, believe it or not, most fights on this planet in all of history occur with not just two people fighting, but more people around you. And if there are people around you while two people are fighting, I guarantee one thing: somebody at some point intervenes. I'll say it again: someone at some point intervenes. Now, if it's a challenge match, like meet me outside and I'll fight you here, and the two combatants meet and they also bring friends to make sure that, they almost always bring friends, to be honest with you. That's one thing. If it's a fight between two people that happens in a crowd, someone usually has friends and supporters around, and there's also random people that'll come in and intervene. In a lot of police crime reports, you'll often hear about somebody takes someone down and starts to administer punishment, and they start to administer really terrific punishment, and they get stabbed in the kidneys by a girlfriend or beat with shoes or something. Like, I've heard of one girlfriend intervening and beating another guy up with some wooden clogs. And one of my students told me he saw a video where someone was talking about a street incident where a group of guys attacked one guy, and he was knocked down to the ground and being beaten hard, and his girlfriend pulled off her high-heeled shoes and began to bash these guys in the head, and they bled and they fled. All right? So real-world grappling can mean a lot of things, but I'll tell you, it does not mean a controlled match with the referees. I'm saying all this because I'm going to tell you a story. It took me almost 3 minutes to get there, but it's a really important story to me because it illustrates a few points. This story is relayed to me by Jose Gonzalez, my friend in Hamilton, New Jersey, and it's about his friend, the late Craig Devries, who I met and sparred with when I was a teenager, and he was a dynamic individual and a great martial artist, right? So this was 1973. Jose and Craig were in high school, and Craig had been challenged by a local wrestler. So Craig at the time was about 5'6", about 150 pounds, around that weight, maybe a few over, maybe a few under. They were still in high school. I don't know what year they were. And also, Jose had brought his friend Jojo Agabetti, and Jose had taught a martial arts club at Steinert High School. This occurred outside of the school in daylight. And Craig had challenged or been challenged by a local tough guy, an Italian-American kid at Steinert High School, who was also a wrestler. This guy was 5'11", 190 pounds. So the other guy had a height, reach, weight advantage. He was a trained grappler, and he had also fought before, which tells you that aside from his wrestling knowledge, he at the very least knew how to ground and pound, how to take someone down and beat them up. That's what wrestlers with street fight experience do. One of my jokes is that the ground and pound was not invented by MMA, not invented by Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, not invented by any existing martial art. It probably started the moment people started, but I joke that it probably started the moment the first school was invented, because it's a schoolyard tactic, right? And since the first known schools in history, is, to my knowledge, are ancient Sumeria, I'm sure as soon as that first school opened and they started carving on their clay tablets, one kid had a beef with another, took him down, and started punching him in the face, right? So now, Jose had been training Craig one-on-one, and I think in that martial arts group, in martial art techniques, and later Craig and Jojo Agavetti would train with Shin's Karate, and they got their red belt, which is just before black. That's like the Tang Soo Do equivalent of brown belt in karate, right? And from what Jose tells me, Craig did not really take this guy seriously. They squared off. He started clowning around, moving around, and did the Ali shuffle. And he was like looking at Jose, like smiling. I'm going to take this guy out, right? And so, because he didn't take him seriously, he did the Ali shuffle. The wrestler looked down, distracted by the feet, and then Craig front kicked him in the face. And the guy started to fall, but being a wrestler, he converted that into a takedown. So, according to Jose, he said he front kicked him. The guy started to fall. It may well be that he was trying to initiate a single or double leg while the kick launched, and when it hit him, he just continued his momentum. But this is something I know about grappling. If you grapple regularly, I mean, I did about 1.5 years of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And what I'll tell you is it does put a lot of stress on the neck and shoulders, so it strengthens the neck, the traps, the shoulders. It's one area of your body that if you're going to stay in it, it's going to get stronger, or it's going to hurt, it's going to tear or something. And so that does mean that someone that has a lot of grappling training has a thick neck and can take a shot. So it's hard to kind of knock him out right off the bat. So anyway, boom, now the fight's on the ground, and the guy gets on top of Craig. And Craig tried to do a double fish hook. So imagine 2 thumbs going into the lips, and he's trying to rip him. And that turned out to be a tactical mistake. And Jose said this guy started to bite into Craig's fingers, and Craig pulled out his right hand and began leopard fisting the guy. Now, this is a leopard fist. Some people call it a half fist, a leopard paw. It's also used in Indonesian styles. It's called the cobra fist. Okay? And it's a very powerful weapon. And one advantage it has is that it can hit the smaller targets, but it doesn't require as much conditioning as the fingertips. Fingertip strikes require conditioning. A half-trained person that doesn't do much impact training, if he's hit a few targets with this, can actually hit a human being and hurt him bad, right? And so he said that the grappler who was on top let go and stood up. He got away from the source of that pain. And this illustrates a point to me, which is punches from the bottom, regular close-fisted punches, and even open-hand palm strikes, normally don't accomplish anything. They have zero leverage. You can take a few, tuck your head in, and, they try to reach around. It's not going to do anything. But a leopard fist strike has the ability to damage and injure and access tight spaces. Even if someone is up on my chest, I can take that leopard fist strike and I can strike the side of the neck, right? I can rub it into the eyes, and I can do things. And it can cause pain, damage, shock, and trauma. And so this trained grappler, who's also had been in street fights or at the very least challenge matches, let go. They stood up. Craig reestablished his stance, roundhouse kicked the guy in the face, and split the guy's lip open. At which point, Jose and Jojo intervened and said, okay, that's enough. It's over. And I'm telling you something. Realistically, this happens, right? If you have challenge matches, if you have street fights, if you have group on group, it's very rarely that when you get into a grappling situation, you can stay there and end it. The only time that happens is if you have friends stopping other people from intervening, or if you're the only one that has friends. And sometimes if you start winning too well, your own supporters and your own friends will stop you like, he's had enough. Okay? Now, and so everyone decided to call it even Steven. And this is called saving face. And this is another thing that will happen in challenge matches and in group combat. Sometimes groups of people or individuals will start a fight, and at some point they will feel like they've had enough. Okay? They can either run away, submit, or mutually back off and kind of be like, that's enough. I've had enough, right? Because what are you fighting for? If you're fighting because it's a challenge match, you're just trying to establish who's better, some dominance or something. And, one guy got taken down, the other guy got a lip split. Maybe you both feel like you've gotten the respect that you wanted, right? If you were fighting for your life, if you were fighting for someone else's life, if you were starving and you were fighting for food or for territory, or in case there was a woman involved and, you were fighting over a girl, the fight might go a little further. According to Jose's analysis, Craig clearly, number one, if he'd have taken him more seriously, he would have probably knocked him out by roundhouse kicking him in the head in the beginning. And the roundhouse kick that he threw was pretty hard and already drew blood, and he was ready to throw more. And I've experienced this where I've had self-defense situations, challenge situations, and things like that, where once someone closed in and took you down and you started hurting them, my favorite trick was to grab the balls and then the throat, right? Sometimes simultaneously, and give them a hard squeeze. And the trained grappler, the guy with a wrestling background, usually pulls off and stands up, and they're kind of shy about closing into range, right? So because of the pain association, if you can make someone bleed, some people it discourages them, and other people it enrages them, and they're willing to go further, and that depends on their fighting experience and background. Now, I'm going to say this. During this discussion I had with Jose, a topic came up, which is, the myopia. Many martial arts styles have myopia. Just like in the, 90s, 70s through the 90s, karate people began to focus more on point sparring, and they began to neglect the grappling aspects. And when the first UFC came on, and mind you, many of those opponents for the Royce Gracie were picked to not have grappling experience or challenge match experience, they suffered. Later on, wrestlers began teaching people how to sprawl and how to defend against takedown. And then you had guys with a combined striking wrestling background, and they began to dominate. And, now many traditional arts have upgraded, and you see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and George St. Pierre, people with karate backgrounds and whatnot, coming in there, and they achieved dominance during their career. Can't be myopic. And also, we talked about, I personally think most Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools these days are focusing on the sport aspect. So you're getting a black belt in the sport of jiu-jitsu. You're spending 10 years at it, right? But, my time in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, we spent very little time defending against punches. Like the Gracie punch defense series, that wasn't part of our curriculum. We never practiced it. I never saw anybody practice it, right? We did practice some punch defenses, but not many. So, grappling, for example, is 1/5 of fighting. You have punching, kicking, and you could include striking into that. You have grappling, all right? You have weapons you hold in your hand, and you have projectile weapons, right? And that's someone who's sort of prepared, not just well-rounded, but, prepared to, and also transitioning from range to range, right? Now you've got people like Eddie Bravo and Joe Rogan, for example, who are touted as, the ultimate exemplars of fighting knowledge and unbeatable fighters. I mean, God bless them for what they do, but if you watch the 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu people, they start all their matches from the butt. They sit on their butt and start their matches that way. And, great. You can dominate in grappling. Try that in Trenton and Hamilton. This fight I told you occurred in Hamilton, New Jersey. In Hamilton, New Jersey is an interesting place because you got suburban kids that can fight as well as the urban street kids. And because of busing and integration for, a long time, those two groups have cross-pollinated. They've traded techniques. They've challenged each other. They've become friends. And some of them trained in the same places, the boxing gyms and martial arts studios, right? You go to Trenton, New Jersey now, and, go to West Trenton or someplace like that, and challenge someone to a fight on the street, on the sidewalk, and sit down on your butt and see what happens, right? It's suicide. It's suicide, right? So you can become fantastically good at a specialized thing. But if you want to be an all-around prepared fighter, and you want to, be ready for desperate situations or, high pressure situations, you've got to know more than one range, and you've got to have a realistic idea of how all of this begins. Most fights begin standing, right? And there's the popular thing about 99% of fights all end up on the ground. That's kind of deceptive. They're talking about if one person stays upright, throws you down, and punches you, they count that as going to the ground, right? So obviously, no, despite all the marketing hype, that's not. It's not realistic to think that every single time you're ever in a fight, you need to dive down on the ground with someone and get them in an armbar. Okay, all of it has its place, and quite frankly, the way violence plays out in the real world, um, you know, non-regulated, non-social violence. If you get down to the ground, oftentimes your priority is do something to get back up. Okay, so and also I want to talk about that leopard fist. There's a lot of really effective open hand strikes that are lost in MMA, lost in Muay Thai, that just aren't a part of, right now everything's geared toward MMA, and a lot of the old school training methods that made you tough, that made you effective in the 60s and 70s and overseas, they're de-emphasized. It's what I call strip mall karate, after school kung fu, stuff geared towards a lot of kids and recreational people. But, the arts had to be sort of defanged and demilitarized to make it palatable to a large cross section of society. But they were real, they exist. And one thing I want to do is put this as a testimony to later generations and this generation that there is more to the martial arts than just, I'll learn some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'll learn some Muay Thai, I'll take a few months of boxing, and now I'm a great MMA fighter, and that prepares me for everything. No, that prepares you for that particular sport at that particular format at that particular time. All right? Thank you very much. You all have a wonderful day.